Scarlett Vaughn built a billion-dollar empire before turning 30, crushed her competitors without mercy, and never let anyone see her sweat. But when her ex-boyfriend's wedding invitation arrived with a handwritten note that read, "Looking forward to seeing who you'll bring," she did something completely insane. She offered $5,000 to her plumber, a widowed single father with paint-stained jeans and a daughter's school pickup schedule, to pretend to be her boyfriend at Manhattan's most exclusive charity gala. What started as a desperate lie to save face became the thing that finally broke through the walls she'd spent a lifetime building. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments below so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's dive in. The email arrived at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, right between Scarlett's third espresso and her daily call with the Hong Kong office. Damian Whitmore and Charlotte Price Williams cordially invite you to an evening of philanthropy and celebration. Scarlett's hand froze halfway to her keyboard. She read it twice, then a third time, searching for the trap she knew had to be hiding in the elegant script and expensive stationery rendered in pixels on her screen. There it was, handwritten at the bottom in Damian's distinctive scrawl. "Looking forward to seeing who you'll bring. It's been too long, S." Her assistant knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "Conference call in 5. Tokyo's already on the line." Scarlett deleted the email with more force than necessary. "Tell them I need 10 minutes. They've been waiting since 10 minutes. The door closed. Scarlett stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, 43 stories above Manhattan. From up here, the city looked like a circuit board, all clean lines and organized chaos. Controllable, logical, not like the sick feeling currently twisting through her stomach. Damian Whitmore. Of course he'd gotten engaged. Of course his fiancée would be Charlotte Price Williams, whose family tree probably had roots going back to the Mayflower. Of course the wedding invitation would arrive exactly 6 days before her 30th birthday, timed with the precision of a tactical strike. And of course he'd find a way to remind her that she'd be arriving alone. Scarlett caught her reflection in the window glass. She looked exactly like what she was: successful, polished, intimidating. The black Armani suit fit perfectly because she'd had it tailored 3 times. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that said she didn't have time for anything complicated. Her makeup was flawless because she'd watched 17 YouTube tutorials until she could recreate the look herself in under 8 minutes. Everything about her appearance was a calculated decision designed to project power. Everything except the tightness around her eyes that no amount of concealer could quite hide. Her phone buzzed. Tokyo, wondering where the hell she was. Scarlett ignored it and pulled up the email again. The gala was in 3 weeks. Black tie. The plaza. All of New York's elite would be there. The same people who'd watched her and Damian together for 2 years, back when she'd been building her company and he'd been building his political connections. Back when she'd actually believed that someone could love her and her ambition at the same time. "You're married to your work," Damian had said the night he ended it. They'd been standing in his family's Hamptons estate, surrounded by old money and older expectations. "I need someone who can actually be present, Scarlett. Not someone who's always thinking about the next deal." She'd wanted to tell him that her work was the reason she could afford to exist in his world at all. That some people didn't have trust funds to fall back on. That building something from nothing required a level of focus he'd never understand because he'd never had to understand it. Instead, she'd just left. Because that was easier than admitting he might be right. Her phone buzzed again. Then again. Then the desk phone started ringing. Scarlett took a breath, smoothed her jacket, and picked up. "This is Vaughn. Sorry for the delay. Let's talk about the Singapore expansion." The next 2 hours disappeared into conference calls, contract negotiations, and a tense discussion with her CFO about their latest acquisition. By the time Scarlett looked up again, it was almost noon and her assistant was standing in the doorway with that expression that meant something had gone wrong. "What now?" "Your apartment called. Something about flooding?" "I have a meeting at 1. They said it's urgent. Water's coming through the ceiling into the unit below." Scarlett closed her laptop harder than necessary. "Fine. Cancel the meeting. Reschedule for tomorrow." "Tomorrow you're in Boston. Then Thursday. Just handle it." 40 minutes later, Scarlett was standing in her Tribeca apartment, watching a man in faded jeans and a tool belt examine the cabinet under her kitchen sink. The super had let him in, muttering something about burst pipes and water damage and insurance claims that Scarlett had stopped listening to halfway through. "Found your problem," the plumber said, his voice slightly muffled from being half inside the cabinet. "Seals completely shot. Must have been leaking for a while." Scarlett's phone buzzed. Her lawyer, asking about the contract she was supposed to have reviewed this morning. She typed out a response with one hand while watching the plumber work with vague irritation. The thing was, she'd bought this place specifically because it was supposed to be maintenance-free. Luxury building, 24-hour concierge, problems that solved themselves as long as you paid enough money. That was the whole point of having money. So you didn't have to deal with burst pipes and water damage and strange men tracking dirt across your marble floors. "It's going to take a few hours to fix properly," the plumber said, emerging from the cabinet. "I can do a temporary patch now, but you'll need a full replacement soon, or it'll just happen again." How soon is soon? Week, maybe 2. He grabbed something from his toolbox, and Scarlett finally got a good look at him. Not what she expected. Older than the usual contractors who rotated through the building, maybe early 30s, with dark hair that needed a cut and the kind of weathered hands that came from actual physical work. He had the build of someone who spent his days doing things that required real strength, not the sculptured gym muscles that Manhattan executives paid personal trainers thousands of dollars to achieve. "You want me to do the temp fix now or come back later?" he asked, apparently not bothered by her staring. Scarlett's phone buzzed again. "Tokyo, round 2. Do it now. I have to take this." She walked to her bedroom and spent the next 45 minutes explaining to 3 different people why the timeline for the Jakarta office needed to be moved up, not back. When she finally emerged, the plumber was packing up his tools. "All set?" she asked. "For now, like I said, you'll want to schedule the replacement soon." He handed her a card. "Just call the office when you're ready." Scarlett glanced at the card. Mercer Plumbing and Repair in simple block letters. No fancy logo, no corporate branding. "Thanks." He nodded and headed for the door, then paused. "You know, you should probably have someone check all the seals in this place. Building's got to be what, 15 years old? They all start going around the same time. I'll mention it to management." "Right, management." Something in his tone suggested he'd dealt with management before and hadn't been impressed. "Have a good one." The door closed behind him, and Scarlett was alone again in her silent apartment with its perfect minimalist furniture and its slowly failing infrastructure. She looked down at the business card in her hand, then tossed it onto the kitchen counter and went back to work. The next week blurred past in the usual chaos. A crisis in the London office. A brilliant engineer threatening to quit. A potential investor who needed to be wined, dined, and convinced that Scarlett's company was worth the $300 million he was considering putting into it. She moved through it all with the same focused intensity that had gotten her this far. The same refusal to show weakness or uncertainty that had made her a legend in tech circles before most people her age had finished paying off their student loans. But that email sat in her inbox like a ticking bomb. "Looking forward to seeing who you'll bring." She'd drafted and deleted 17 different responses. Everything from polite acceptance to elaborate excuses about scheduling conflicts. In the end, she hadn't replied at all, because all the options felt like admissions of defeat. It shouldn't matter. Damien was her past. She'd moved on, built something bigger than he'd ever accomplished with his family money and his political ambitions and his carefully curated image. Except she hadn't moved on. Not really, and the invitation proved it. Because a person who'd actually moved on wouldn't care about showing up alone to her ex-boyfriend's engagement party, wouldn't spend 3 in the morning staring at her ceiling wondering if he'd been right about her all along, wouldn't feel like her entire life was just an elaborate performance designed to convince the world she didn't need anyone. The flooding started again on a Friday. Scarlett was in her home office, barely listening to a conference call when she heard the telltale drip coming from the kitchen. She walked in to find water pooling under the sink cabinet, exactly like before. Son of a bitch. She ended the call without explanation and spent 20 minutes on hold with the building's management company before, getting transferred to someone who informed her that the regular maintenance crew wouldn't be available until Monday. "It's flooding my apartment right now. We can put in an emergency request with an outside contractor, but there will be an additional fee." "I don't care about the fee. Just send someone." 2 hours later, her intercom buzzed. The same plumber from last time stood in her doorway with the same toolbox and the same expression of mild resignation that seemed to be his default setting. "We've got to stop meeting like this," he said, which would have been charming if Scarlett had been in any mood to be charmed. "I thought you fixed it." "I did a temporary patch, like I said." He headed straight for the kitchen without waiting for an invitation. "This is the permanent fix I told you to schedule." Scarlett followed him, feeling defensive in a way that annoyed her. "I've been busy." "I bet." He crouched down and started pulling things out from under the sink. "Running an empire doesn't leave much time for plumbing maintenance, huh?" She blinked. "How do you know what I do?" "Googled the address after I left last time. Wanted to know what kind of building cuts corners on basic maintenance." He glanced back at her. "Found your name instead. Tech Billionaire." "What? Impressive." Most people said that with either envy or admiration. He just said it like a fact, the same way he might comment on the weather. "If you're expecting a tip based on that information, just explaining why I'm not surprised you ignored my advice about the replacement." He turned back to the pipes. "Rich people are great at making money, not always great at taking care of basic infrastructure." Scarlett opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, because he wasn't exactly wrong. She watched him work for a few minutes in silence, her phone buzzing constantly in her hand. Emails, texts, Slack messages, the world demanding pieces of her attention like always. "You always work on Fridays?" the plumber asked without looking up. "I always work." "Yeah, I noticed. Last time you were on the phone the whole time I was here. Today, too." "Well, some of us have demanding jobs." "I've got a demanding job. Still manage to clock out sometimes." He twisted something with enough force that his shoulders tensed. "Though I guess when you're the boss, there's nobody to tell you to go home." Scarlett's phone buzzed again. Her assistant asking about Monday's schedule. She started to type a response, then stopped. "Can I ask you something?" What? The plumber sat back on his heels. "Shoot. You ever do anything you know is probably a bad idea just to prove a point?" He studied her for a moment, and Scarlett had the uncomfortable feeling of being actually seen by someone who had no reason to pretend to be impressed by her. "Once or twice," he said finally. "Usually regretted it. Why?" She should have said, "Never mind." Should have made some excuse about the question being rhetorical. Instead, she heard herself say, "My ex-boyfriend is getting married." "Okay." "He invited me to his engagement party." "Also okay." "Yeah." He specifically mentioned that he's looking forward to seeing who I'll bring. Understanding crossed the plumber's face. "Ah, and you don't have anyone to bring." "I don't have time for anyone to bring," Scarlett corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" The question landed harder than it should have. Scarlett looked down at her phone, at the 17 notifications that had accumulated in the last 3 minutes alone. "I built a multi-billion-dollar company," she said. "I employ over 3,000 people. I've been on the cover of Forbes 3 times, and the only thing anyone's going to talk about at this party is the fact that I showed up alone." The plumber stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "So don't show up." "That's not an option." "Well, everything's an option. You're just choosing to care what these people think. Easy to say when you're not the one being judged." "Shit. Lady, I'm a single dad who cleans other people's pipes for a living. I get judged every time I walk into my daughter's private school for pickup." He said it without self-pity, just stating facts. Difference is, I stopped giving a damn what those people think about 5 years ago. Something in Scarlett's chest tightened. "You have a daughter." "Yeah, Ava, she's 7. His expression softened in a way that made him look younger. Smart as hell. Obsessed with dinosaurs and convinced she's going to be a paleontologist when she grows up. "That's..." Scarlett stopped, unsure what she'd been about to say. "You mentioned private school?" "Well, scholarship. My wife..." He paused, and Scarlett saw the flash of pain before he controlled it. "Her mom wanted her to go to St. Catherine's. I've been breaking my back to keep her there since. Anyway, long story. The apartment fell quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic 40 stories below. Scarlett's phone buzzed again. She looked at it, then at the man standing in her kitchen, then back at the phone. What she was thinking was insane, completely insane. "How would you like to make $5,000? she asked. The plumber raised an eyebrow. Doing what? Being my date to this party. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he laughed. An actual, genuine laugh that sounded like he couldn't help himself. You're serious? Completely serious. 3 hours max. Wear a tux. Show up on my arm. Help me prove that I've moved on with my life. 5,000 cash. Lady, Scarlett. Scarlett. He shook his head. That's the worst idea I've heard all year. Is that a no? You should probably think about why you're willing to pay a stranger $5,000 to pretend to be your boyfriend instead of just admitting you don't need to prove anything to your ex. Heat crept up Scarlett's neck. Thanks for the psychology lesson. Are you interested or not? Right. He looked at her for a long moment, something calculating in his expression. When's the party? 3 weeks. Saturday night. The plaza. And all I'd have to do is show up and pretend we're together? That's it. No other expectations? Scarlett felt her face flush deeper. I'm not propositioning you. This is a business transaction. Right, business. He ran a hand through his hair. You know how crazy this sounds, right? I'm aware. And you still want to do it? I'm aware of that too. The plumber, she still didn't know his first name, looked at her like he was trying to solve a complicated equation. Finally, he sighed. My name's Caleb, he said. Caleb Mercer. And yeah, okay, I'll do it. Relief flooded through Scarlett so fast it almost made her dizzy. Really? Really? But not for the money. He held up a hand before she could protest. I'm not turning down $5,000, but I'm doing this because you look like you're about to crawl out of your own skin, and I've got a soft spot for people who are clearly going through something even if they won't admit it. I'm not going through anything. I just need a date. Sure, and I just need to finish fixing your sink. Caleb grabbed his wrench and crouched back down. We both believe that. Ikring ochiman. Scarlett stood in her kitchen, phone still buzzing in her hand, and wondered if she'd just made the best decision of her life, or the worst. Probably the worst. But at least Damian Whitmore wouldn't get to watch her walk into that party alone. The next 2 weeks were a special kind of chaos. First, Scarlett had to actually plan how to turn her plumber into a convincing boyfriend for Manhattan's social elite, which meant a crash course in what kind of details wealthy couples would know about each other, how long they'd supposedly been dating, and how to explain how they'd met without sounding completely insane. She drafted a whole backstory. They'd met when he was working on her building, started talking, found common ground. It wasn't technically a lie, which made it easier to remember. Caleb had listened to her entire planned story with increasing amusement, then said, or we could just tell people we met and liked each other. You know, like normal human beings. Nothing about this situation is normal. Fair point. They'd met twice more before the party, once at a coffee shop near his daughter's school, where Caleb had shown up in the same work clothes and ordered black coffee like someone who didn't have time for complicated drinks, and once at a restaurant Scarlett had chosen specifically because she knew none of her colleagues would be there. The coffee shop meeting had lasted 20 minutes before Caleb had to leave for pickup. The dinner had gone longer, mostly because Scarlett had been oddly reluctant to end it. So what do you actually do? Caleb had asked, after they'd covered the basics of their fake relationship. Like day to day. What does a tech billionaire do with her time? Meetings, strategy sessions, putting out fires. Sounds thrilling. It's necessary, Crom. That's not the same as thrilling. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. You actually enjoy it? The question had caught her off guard. I built it. Of course I enjoy it. Building something and enjoying it aren't the same either. Scarlett had wanted to argue, but something in his expression made her pause. What about you? You enjoy plumbing? Honestly, sometimes. He'd shrugged. It's problem solving. People call me when something's broken. I figure out how to fix it. There's something satisfying about that. Plus, I set my own hours, which matters when you've got a kid. That must be hard. Single parenting. Hardest thing I've ever done. No hesitation, no sugarcoating, but she's worth it. Every late night, every missed job, every time I want to just sleep for 3 days straight, she's worth all of it. Scarlett had found herself thinking about that conversation at odd moments over the following week. about what it meant to build something because you loved it versus building something because you needed to prove you could. The day of the party arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that felt like mockery. Sunny, 72 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. The kind of day that made Manhattan look like it belonged in a movie instead of real life. Scarlett stood in front of her closet at 4 in the afternoon, staring at 17 different dresses she'd had sent over from various designers. She'd narrowed it down to 3, then 2, then stood paralyzed trying to decide between them for 20 minutes before her assistant called. "Please tell me you're not still deciding what to wear." "I'm not still deciding," Scarlett lied. "Car's picking you up at 7:30. Your date's meeting you there at 8. Don't be late." Her date. Right. Because she'd hired someone to pretend to be her boyfriend. This was definitely happening and not at all insane. Scarlett chose the midnight blue dress because it made her look powerful without trying too hard. She did her own makeup because she couldn't stand the thought of someone else touching her face right now. She put on the diamond earrings her mother had left her, then took them off, then put them back on. At 7:15, she looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone who looked exactly like she was trying too hard to look like she wasn't trying at all. Perfect. The car ride to the plaza took 23 minutes. Scarlett spent all of them running through her story, her breathing exercises, and her reasons for not just turning around and going home. Caleb was waiting by the fountain when she arrived, and Scarlett actually stopped walking for a second because he cleaned up better than she'd expected. The tux fit him well enough that it had to have been tailored, and he'd gotten his hair cut. "You look nervous," he said when she reached him. "I'm not nervous." "Your left hand's shaking." Scarlett looked down and realized he was right. She forced her hand to still. "I'm fine." "Okay." He offered his arm. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." They walked into the plaza together, and Scarlett felt the weight of a dozen gazes land on them immediately. The ballroom was already half full, populated by exactly the kind of people she'd expected. Manhattan's elite in all their polished glory, dripping with jewelry and judgment in equal measure. She spotted Damien almost immediately. He was holding court near the bar, Charlotte on his arm, looking like old money personified in cream silk and pearls. He caught Scarlett's eye and smiled, the kind of smile that said he'd been waiting for this. "That him?" Caleb asked quietly. "That's him. He looks like the kind of guy who's never changed his own oil." Despite everything, Scarlett almost laughed. "Probably hasn't. Want to go over there now or make him sweat a bit?" "Make him sweat." "Smart." Caleb guided her toward the opposite side of the room, moving with easy confidence that didn't match his working-class background at all. "So what's the play here? We circulate, we look happy, we make small talk?" "Something like that." "And if people ask how we met?" "We tell them the truth. You were working on my apartment. We started talking. One thing led to another. Simple. I like it." He paused as a waiter passed by with champagne. "You want a drink?" "Oh." Desperately. He grabbed 2 glasses and handed her one. Their fingers brushed, and Scarlett was suddenly very aware of how close he was standing. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something simple and clean, not the overpowering designer scents most men in this room probably wore. Scarlett Vaughn. What a surprise. She turned to find Rebecca Ashworth bearing down on them, her expression perfectly pleasant and her eyes sharp as knives. Rebecca ran a competing tech firm and had never quite forgiven Scarlett for landing an investor they'd both been courting 3 years ago. "Rebecca, good to see you. And who's this?" Rebecca's gaze slid to Caleb with barely concealed curiosity. "Caleb Mercer," he said, offering his hand. "Nice to meet you, Chief." "Mercer." Rebecca shook his hand, clearly running the name through her mental database of important people and coming up empty. "What do you do, Caleb?" "Plumbing, mostly. Some general contracting." The silence that followed lasted maybe 2 seconds, but felt like an hour. Rebecca's perfectly maintained expression flickered, just for a moment, before she recovered. "How interesting. And how did you two meet?" He fixed my sink," Scarlett said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Turns out he's good with his hands." Caleb, to his credit, didn't react beyond a slight tightening of his jaw that might have been suppressed amusement. "I see." Rebecca took a delicate sip of her champagne. "Well, how, refreshing." Most people in our circle tend to date within their, professional sphere. Maybe that's the problem with our circle, Scarlett said. Rebecca's smile went sharp. Perhaps. Well, do enjoy the party. I'm sure Damien and Charlotte will be thrilled to see you both. She drifted away, and Scarlett resisted the urge to drain her entire champagne glass in one go. She seems nice, Caleb said. She's a shark. They're all sharks. And you're what, different? Scarlett looked at him. I used to be. I think, but then. Before he could respond, another couple approached, then another. For the next 40 minutes, Scarlett and Caleb worked the room together, and something strange started to happen. Instead of wilting under the scrutiny, Caleb seemed almost amused by it. When Gregory Morrison, hedge fund manager and notorious snob, asked what he did in the trades, Caleb responded with a detailed explanation of pressure differentials in residential plumbing that somehow made pipe maintenance sound more intellectually demanding than stock speculation. When Jennifer Chen made a passive-aggressive comment about different worlds colliding, Caleb just smiled and said, Yeah, I don't usually get to wear a tux to work. It's nice not smelling like PVC cement for once. The thing that surprised Scarlett most wasn't that he held his own. It was that he didn't seem to be trying to. He wasn't performing or code switching or pretending to be something he wasn't. He was just himself, unbothered by the judgment radiating from every corner of the room. You're good at this, she murmured when they finally had a moment alone. At what? Not caring what they think. Caleb shrugged. Practice. You spend enough time getting looked down on, you either break or you stop giving them the power. He paused. Also, half these people can't change a tire. Kind of takes the edge off their superiority complex. Scarlett was about to respond when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Damien standing there with Charlotte, both of them wearing matching expressions of polite interest that didn't quite reach their eyes. Scarlett, Damien said warmly, I'm so glad you could make it. Damien, congratulations. She gestured to Charlotte. Charlotte, you look beautiful. Thank you. Charlotte's voice had that breathy quality that came from expensive boarding schools and debutante training. We're just thrilled you could join us. The us hung in the air like a challenge. Scarlett felt Caleb shift slightly closer to her side. And you must be. Damien trailed off, waiting for an introduction. Caleb Mercer. Caleb extended his hand, and Damien shook it with the kind of firm grip designed to establish dominance. Caleb didn't seem to notice or care. Nice party. Open bar's a classy touch. Charlotte laughed, the sound delicate and rehearsed. We wanted everyone to enjoy themselves. How do you two know each other? He fixed my sink, Scarlett said before she could second-guess the bluntness. We got a talking. Turns out we had more in common than I expected. Mom? Yes, it did. How serendipitous. Damien's smile had a sharp edge now. What do you do, Caleb? Plumbing. Some general contracting on the side. The silence that followed was different from the ones before. This one had weight to it, loaded with implications that Scarlett could see Damien calculating in real time. Fascinating, he said finally. I don't think I've ever met an actual tradesman at one of these events. First time for everything, Caleb said easily. Charlotte jumped in, her voice pitched just a bit too bright. Well, we think it's wonderful that Scarlett's found someone so grounded. She's always been so focused on work. It's nice to see her branching out. The condescension in branching out was so thick Scarlett could have cut it with a knife. She opened her mouth to say something cutting, but Caleb beat her to it. Yeah, she works hard, Ashwan, he said, his tone conversational. But she's also funny as hell when she's not in CEO mode. Did you know she does these perfect impressions of her board members? Had me dying the other night. Scarlett blinked. She'd never done impressions of her board members. But the way Caleb said it, casual, affectionate, like he was sharing an inside joke, made it sound completely plausible. I didn't know that, Damien said, something flickering in his expression that might have been surprise. Most people don't. She doesn't exactly advertise it. Caleb's hand found the small of Scarlett's back, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. Anyway, we should probably make the rounds. Lots of people to schmooze, right? Of course. Charlotte's smile had frozen in place. We'll catch up more later. Caleb guided Scarlett away smoothly, his hand still resting against her back. They made it halfway across the room before she finally found her voice. I don't do impressions of my board members. I know, but he doesn't. Caleb grabbed 2 more champagne glasses from a passing waiter and handed her one. Guy was trying to make you feel small. Figured I'd remind him he doesn't actually know you that well anymore. Something warm unfurled in Scarlett's chest. That was strategic, manipulative, weirdly satisfying. All of those things. Good. He took a sip of his champagne and grimaced. This stuff tastes like expensive regret. Scarlett laughed, an actual, genuine laugh that surprised her. That's exactly what it tastes like. They spent the next hour navigating the party together, and Scarlett found herself relaxing in increments. Caleb had a way of deflecting the worst of the judgment with humor and unbothered confidence that made the whole thing feel less like an ordeal and more like an elaborate joke they were in on together. When Marcus Thornton started pontificating about the dignity of labor in a way that was clearly meant to be patronizing, Caleb just nodded along and then asked detailed questions about Marcus's involvement with his family's manufacturing company that made it clear the man had never actually set foot in a factory. When Priya Kapoor made a comment about different social spheres, Caleb agreed enthusiastically and launched into a story about fixing a toilet at a Park Avenue penthouse where the owner had apparently never learned how to use a plunger. You're enjoying this, Scarlett said when they finally escaped to a quieter corner of the ballroom. Little bit. He wasn't even trying to hide his grin. These people are ridiculous. You know that, right? I'm one of these people. No, you're not. You're performing being one of these people. There's a difference. Scarlett wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because he was right. Every interaction tonight had felt like a carefully choreographed dance. Every word measured and calculated. Even her dress, her makeup, the way she held her champagne glass, all of it was armor. I should probably talk to Damien again before we leave, she said. Close the loop. You sure you want to do that? No, but that's the point, isn't it? Show him I'm fine. Prove I've moved on. Caleb studied her for a moment. You know you don't actually have to prove anything to him, right? Easy to say. Doesn't make it less true. Before Scarlett could respond, the crowd shifted and she found herself face to face with Vanessa Nil Wu, one of her oldest friends from business school. Vanessa's eyes widened when she saw Caleb. Scarlett! I didn't know you were seeing anyone. It's relatively new, Scarlett said, trying for casual. Well, introduce us. The next few minutes were a blur of introductions and small talk, but Vanessa kept shooting Scarlett looks that clearly said, we need to talk alone immediately. Finally, she grabbed Scarlett's arm. Bathroom. Now. Girl talk emergency. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? Probably, but Vanessa said cheerfully. Come on, Scarlett. Scarlett let herself be dragged to the ladies' room, a marble and gold affair that was nicer than most people's apartments. Vanessa waited until they were alone before rounding on her. Okay, spill. Who is he and where have you been hiding him? His name's Caleb. He's a plumber. We met when he was working on my apartment. Vanessa's jaw actually dropped. You're dating your plumber? Is that a problem? No, it's just, you never date, like ever. And now you show up to Damien's engagement party with a guy who looks like that and you're acting like it's no big deal? It's not a big deal. Scarlett, Vanessa leaned against the counter, her expression softening. I've known you for 10 years. You've never brought anyone to an event like this. Not even Damien got this kind of public acknowledgement until you'd been together for like a year. Scarlett busied herself checking her makeup in the mirror. Things are different now. Yeah, I can see that. He seems good for you. You talked to him for 3 minutes. Long enough to see he makes you smile. When's the last time I saw you actually smile at one of these things? Vanessa paused. Damien's losing his mind, by the way. Saw him watching you two earlier. Pretty sure Charlotte noticed too. Good. Is that what this is? Making him jealous? The question hit harder than Scarlett expected. No. Maybe. I don't know. Scarlett. He invited me to this specifically to humiliate me, Vanessa. That note about looking forward to seeing who I'd bring? He knew I'd be alone. He wanted everyone to see it. So you hired a date? Scarlett's silence was answer enough. Oh my God, you actually hired him. Vanessa's eyes went wide. That's either the most brilliant or the most insane thing you've ever done. Probably both. Does he know it's fake? Of course he knows. I'm not a complete sociopath. Vanessa was quiet for a moment, studying Scarlett's reflection in the mirror. Are you sure it's fake? What's that supposed to mean? Just that I saw how he looks at you and how you look at him. If this is an act, you're both really committed to the bit. We barely know each other. Sometimes that's when it's easiest to be real with someone, when they don't have any preconceived notions about who you're supposed to be. Vanessa touched Scarlett's shoulder gently. I'm not saying marry the guy. I'm just saying maybe don't dismiss whatever this is just because it started as a transaction. Scarlett didn't know how to respond to that. Scarlett didn't, so she just smoothed her dress and headed for the door. We should get back. When they returned to the ballroom, Caleb was exactly where she'd left him, looking completely at ease despite being surrounded by people who probably considered him beneath their notice. He caught her eye and smiled, and something in Scarlett's chest did a complicated twist. Everything okay? He asked when she reached him. Fine. Vanessa's just nosy. Friend prerogative. He glanced around the room. So, we've been here 2 hours. Think we've made enough of an impression? Probably. Why? Because I'm starving, and this fancy food is terrible. They've got like 1 shrimp on each plate, and they call it a meal. Scarlett looked at the elaborate catering spread, hundreds of dollars worth of carefully arranged appetizers that were more art than sustenance. It's supposed to be artisanal, Shipki. It's supposed to keep you hungry, so you drink more champagne. He paused. There's a diner 3 blocks from here, open 24 hours. Makes a burger that'll actually fill you up. You want to leave my ex-boyfriend's engagement party to get diner food? I want to stop pretending to enjoy overpriced shrimp and go somewhere we can actually talk without everyone staring at us like we're a social experiment. He met her eyes. But if you need to stay longer, we stay. Scarlett looked around the ballroom, at the people she'd spent years trying to impress, at Damien, who was watching her from across the room with an expression she couldn't quite read, at the entire glittering, suffocating world she'd fought so hard to be part of. A burger sounds perfect, she said. They made their exit quietly, slipping out while most people were distracted by the dessert service. The cool night air hit Scarlett as soon as they stepped outside, and she took a deep breath, feeling something tight in her chest finally loosen. You okay? Caleb asked. Yeah, just needed to get out of there. Understandable. Those people were exhausting, and I only had to deal with them for 2 hours. Can't imagine doing it regularly. You get used to it. Do you, though? Huh. They walked the 3 blocks to the diner in comfortable silence. It was the kind of place Scarlett would normally never notice. Fluorescent lighting, cracked vinyl booths, a laminated menu that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1987. But when they slid into a corner booth and Caleb ordered them both burgers and fries without asking if that was okay, she found she didn't mind. So, Caleb said once the waitress had left. That was interesting. That's one word for it. How do you think we did? Convince everyone you've moved on. Scarlett fiddled with her napkin. I think we convinced them I'm dating someone wildly inappropriate. Ouch. You know what I mean. Yeah, I do. And for what it's worth, most of those people seemed more interested in judging your choices than actually caring about your happiness. He paused, including your ex. Damien wasn't always like that. Maybe not, but he is now. Caleb leaned back in the booth. Guy looked at you like you were a stock he sold too early, not like someone he actually cares about. The observation was uncomfortably accurate. We were together for 2 years. Doesn't mean he knew you. Their food arrived. Massive burgers that were absolutely nothing like the artisanal sliders at the party. Scarlett picked up hers and took a bite, and the greasy, salty perfection of it made her want to laugh. This is so much better than that party food, she admitted. Told you. Caleb grinned. Sometimes the best things are the ones that aren't trying to impress anybody. They ate in silence for a few minutes, and Scarlett found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't all night. Maybe all month. There was something disarming about sitting in a diner at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night with a man she barely knew, eating a burger that was definitely going to destroy her carefully planned macros, and not caring at all. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Shoot." "Why'd you actually agree to do this? And don't say it was for the money." Caleb considered the question while chewing a fry. "Honestly, you look desperate. And I know what that feels like. Desperate. To want to prove something so badly you'll do something crazy for it." He met her eyes. "My wife, Ava's mom, she died 4 years ago. Car accident. Nothing dramatic, just wrong place, wrong time. And for the first year after, I was not okay. Kept trying to prove I could handle everything by myself. That I didn't need help. That I was fine. Were you fine? Or seats. Hell no, I was drowning. But I couldn't admit it because admitting it felt like failing her. Like if I couldn't be the perfect single dad, I was somehow dishonoring her memory." Scarlett's throat tightened. "What changed?" Ava's teacher called me in for a meeting, told me my daughter had stopped talking in class, stopped playing with other kids, and I realized I'd been so focused on proving I could do it alone that I hadn't noticed I was failing the one person who actually mattered. He pushed his plate aside. So I started asking for help, got Ava into therapy, joined a single-parent support group, stopped pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. That must have been hard. Hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than losing Sarah, honestly, because at least grief is something that happens to you. Admitting you need help is a choice." He paused. "When you asked me to come to that party, you had the same look I used to see in the mirror, like you were willing to do anything to avoid admitting something was wrong." Scarlett looked down at her plate. "Nothing's wrong." "Scarlett, I'm serious. I have everything I wanted. Successful company, financial security, respect in my field. And you're so miserable, you paid a stranger to pretend to be your boyfriend just to avoid looking pathetic in front of your ex." The words landed like a slap. Scarlett's first instinct was to get defensive, to retreat behind the walls she'd spent years building. But something about the way Caleb was looking at her, not with judgment, just honest concern, made the walls feel pointless. "I'm not miserable," she said quietly. "I'm just tired." "Of what?" "Performing. Being the person everyone expects me to be. Making decisions that affect thousands of people and never being allowed to show doubt or weakness or uncertainty." She ran a hand through her hair, disturbing the careful styling. "Do you know what it's like to have everyone watching you all the time? Waiting for you to fail so they can say they knew you didn't have what it takes?" "No, but I know what it's like to be so afraid of failing that you stop trying to do anything else." Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was so casual and unexpected that Scarlett almost pulled away. Almost. "You're allowed to want something different, you know. Success doesn't have to look like what everyone told you it should." "What if I don't know what else I want?" "Then you figure it out, try things, fail at some of them. Be a person instead of a brand." Scarlett looked at their joined hands, her carefully manicured nails against his work-roughened palm. "When did you get so wise?" 4 years of solo parenting will do that. Also, Ava's got this thing where she asks why about everything, so I've gotten really good at examining my assumptions. He squeezed her hand once and then let go. "Speaking of, I should probably get home. My neighbor's watching her, but it's getting late." "Right, of course." Scarlett reached for her purse, but Caleb waved her off. "I've got it." "You don't have to." "I know, but you paid me $5,000 to wear a tux. Least I can do is buy you a burger." They split the check despite his protests and walked back out into the night. The city was quieter now, the usual Manhattan chaos muted to a dull background hum. Caleb flagged down a cab and opened the door for her. "Thanks for tonight," Scarlett said. "For everything." No problem. Good luck with the fallout tomorrow." "Fallout?" "You showed up to your ex's engagement party with a plumber. People are definitely going to talk." Scarlett found herself smiling. "Let them." She climbed into the cab and watched through the back window as Caleb headed in the opposite direction, hands in his pockets, looking completely unbothered by the fact that he'd just spent 3 hours in a world that would normally never acknowledge his existence. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Scarlett felt something shift inside her. Something that might have been hope, or might have just been exhaustion, but either way, it felt like the beginning of something different. The next morning, Scarlett woke up to 47 text messages, 19 missed calls, and an inbox that had exploded overnight. Most of it was exactly what Caleb had predicted: gossip, speculation, thinly veiled questions about her new boyfriend. Vanessa had sent a string of increasingly enthusiastic messages. Rebecca Ashworth had sent a passive-aggressive email about mixing business and pleasure. Even Damien had texted, a single message that just said, "We should talk." Scarlett deleted it without responding. She was halfway through her second coffee when her assistant called. "Please tell me you're sitting down," Jessica said without preamble. "Why?" "Because you're trending on Twitter." "Well, not you specifically, but Billionaire's blue-collar boyfriend is. Someone at the party last night posted photos." Scarlett's stomach dropped. "Photos?" "You and your date. Looking very cozy, by the way. The comments are mixed." "Mixed how? What?" "Some people think it's romantic. Some people think you're slumming. Some people are writing think pieces about class and dating and whether successful women should be allowed to date down." Jessica paused. "That last part is making me want to throw my phone in the river, for the record. Send me the links." "Are you sure you want to send them?" The next hour was a special kind of torture. Scarlett read through article after article dissecting her dating choices, her appearance at the party, what it meant for successful women to choose partners outside their socioeconomic bracket. Half the comments were supportive. The other half were vicious in ways that made her want to delete every social media account she had. The worst part was the ones that speculated she was doing it for attention, that a woman like her couldn't possibly be genuinely attracted to a working-class single father, that it had to be a publicity stunt or a phase or some kind of elaborate rebellion. Scarlett's phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Saw the articles. "Sorry if I made things harder for you. Caleb." She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Not your fault. People were going to talk no matter what. Still, if you need me to say something or disappear or whatever, I can do that." The offer was so earnest it made her chest ache. "Don't disappear. I'm fine." "You sure?" Scarlett looked at the laptop screen, at the hundreds of strangers debating her worth and her choices and her right to make her own decisions about who she spent time with. "No, but I will be." The response came back almost immediately. "That's the spirit. Let me know if you change your mind about the disappearing thing." Scarlett set her phone down and stared out her window at the Manhattan skyline. 43 stories below, people were living their lives without caring what strangers on the internet thought about their dating choices, without performing success or proving their worth or building empires just to avoid feeling empty. She thought about Caleb going home to his daughter last night, about the easy way he'd navigated a room full of people who looked down on him, about how he'd offered to buy her a burger instead of pretending to enjoy champagne and shrimp. Her phone rang. Damien's name on the screen. Scarlett let it go to voicemail. Whatever he wanted to say, she didn't need to hear it. For the first time since she'd received that invitation, she realized she genuinely didn't care what Damien Whitmore thought about her choices. The realization should have felt liberating. Instead, it just felt strange. Like she'd been carrying something heavy for so long that, now that it was gone, she didn't quite know how to balance without its weight. The next few days were chaotic in ways Scarlett hadn't anticipated. The photos from the party kept circulating. She got interview requests from 3 different magazines wanting to talk about her unconventional relationship. Her board members started asking pointed questions about her focus and her priorities. Through it all, Caleb texted occasionally. Nothing heavy, just check-ins and the occasional joke about the absurdity of internet discourse. He sent her a screenshot of someone's tweet calling him a gold-digging working-class hero with the message, "Pretty sure that's an oxymoron." She'd laughed despite everything. On Thursday, her assistant buzzed her office line. "There's someone here to see you, says it's personal." "Who?" "A Mr. Mercer?" Scarlett's heart did something complicated. "Send him in." Caleb appeared in her doorway 30 seconds later, looking wildly out of place in his work clothes against the backdrop of her pristine office. He had a grease stain on one sleeve and his hair was messy like he'd been running his hands through it. Hey, he said. Sorry to show up unannounced. I was working on a building 3 blocks from here and thought I'd check in, see how you're holding up. I'm fine. Ah. That's what you said on Monday, and Tuesday, and yesterday. I'm consistently fine. Caleb closed the door behind him and leaned against it. Scarlett, something in her cracked. Not broke, just cracked, like ice under too much pressure finally starting to give. I've gotten death threats, she said quietly. Actual death threats from strangers on the internet who think I'm betraying successful women by dating someone who works with his hands. My CFO asked if this relationship was going to become a liability concern. And Damien won't stop calling. What's he want? I don't know. I won't answer. She sat down heavily in her chair. This was supposed to make things better, prove I'd moved on. Instead, it's like I opened a door to let everyone in the world have an opinion about my personal life. Caleb crossed the office and sat in the chair across from her desk. You know you can end this any time, right? Tell people we broke up, or that it was just a casual thing. I'll disappear. Problem solved. I don't want you to disappear. Tam patiti. The words came out before Scarlett could stop them, surprising both of them. Okay, Caleb said carefully. Then what do you want? That was the question, wasn't it? What did she want? That was, I want to not care what people think, Scarlett said. I want to make decisions based on what makes me happy instead of what makes me look successful. I want... She stopped, the weight of it hitting her all at once. You want what? Caleb prompted gently. I want to have dinner with you and Ava, Scarlett said. Not as a transaction or a performance, just dinner, like normal people. Caleb studied her for a long moment. You sure about that? Because Ava's 7. She's going to ask you a million questions and probably spill something on you and definitely want to show you her entire dinosaur collection. I'm sure, but... And you know this is going to make things more complicated, right? If we actually start spending time together outside of fake date scenarios. I know. Okay then. Caleb stood up. Tomorrow night, 6:30. I'll text you the address. Fair warning, it's Brooklyn and the apartment's small, and we're having spaghetti because that's the only thing Ava will eat on Fridays. Sounds perfect. He smiled, that genuine, unguarded smile that made him look younger. See you tomorrow then. After he left, Scarlett sat at her desk for a long time, looking at the city spread out below her office window. Somewhere out there, people were still tweeting about her dating choices. Her ex-boyfriend was probably planning his next move. Her board members were definitely questioning her judgment. And for the first time in her professional life, Scarlett Vaughn didn't care. She had a dinner to prepare for. Scarlett spent Friday afternoon in back-to-back meetings that should have required her full attention, but instead found her mind wandering to what she should wear to dinner with a 7-year-old and her father in Brooklyn. By 4 o'clock, she'd mentally cycled through her entire wardrobe 3 times and come up empty. You're distracted, her CTO observed during a strategy session about their European expansion. I'm fine. You just approved a budget line item we didn't even propose. Scarlett looked down at the spreadsheet in front of her and realized he was right. I'll review it again later. The meeting ended 20 minutes early because she couldn't focus. Meeting ended 20:01. And Jessica cornered her before she could escape to her office. Okay, what's going on? You've been weird all day. I'm not weird. You approved something without reading it. You're never not reading things. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Does this have anything to do with your plumber? He's not my plumber. Right. He's your fake boyfriend who you're now actually spending time with. I've been following the updates. At Scarlett's look, Jessica held up her hands. I'm your assistant. It's literally my job to know what's happening in your life. I'm having dinner with him tonight, and his daughter, and I don't know what to wear. Jessica's expression softened. Oh, you actually like him. I don't know what I feel. That's the problem. Okay, first piece of advice? Don't wear anything you'd wear to a board meeting. You're having dinner with a kid, not pitching to investors. I don't have anything that's not board meeting clothes. Then we're going shopping. Come on. I have work. You just cut a meeting short because you can't concentrate. The work can wait an hour. They ended up at a boutique in Soho that Scarlett had walked past 1,000 times, but never entered because it didn't carry the kind of severe professional wear she usually bought. Jessica pulled a soft blue sweater off a rack and held it up. This, with jeans. You do own jeans, right? Somewhere. We're buying you jeans too, then. An hour later, Scarlett was back in her apartment, staring at clothes that felt foreign on her body. The jeans fit well, but felt too casual. The sweater was comfortable, but didn't project any kind of authority. She looked like a normal person, which was somehow more terrifying than any board presentation she'd ever given. Her phone buzzed. Caleb's address in Brooklyn, followed by, "Ava's been asking about you all day. Fair warning, she's going to interrogate you." Scarlett typed back, "What should I expect? Questions about dinosaurs, your favorite color, whether you've ever seen a real volcano, if you think dragons could be real, and probably something about why adults are always tired." Despite her nerves, Scarlett smiled. "I can handle that. We'll see." She broke her last babysitter. The subway ride to Brooklyn took 40 minutes, and Scarlett spent most of it second-guessing every decision that had led her here. She could have sent a car, could have suggested a restaurant instead, could have maintained the professional distance that had served her so well for the past decade. But she hadn't, because some part of her, the part that had survived on determination and coffee during the early startup years, before the money and the board meetings and the careful image management, wanted to see what this could be if she stopped performing long enough to let it happen. Caleb's building was a walk-up in Park Slope, the kind of place with character that real estate agents used as code for small and old, but in a nice neighborhood. Scarlett climbed 3 flights of stairs and found apartment 3C, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. She knocked. The door flew open to reveal a small girl with dark hair and a ponytail, and eyes that were studying Scarlett with unsettling intensity. "You're really tall," Ava announced. "Ava, what did we talk about?" Caleb appeared behind his daughter, looking harassed and wearing an apron that said "Kiss the Cook" in faded letters. "You said to be polite." "That was polite. I didn't say anything about her clothes." "Also be polite." "Were you going to say something about my clothes?" Scarlett asked, genuinely curious. Ava considered this seriously. "They're very blue, but I like blue. It's my 3rd favorite color." "What are the first 2? Purple and green. Dad says I can't pick both because they don't go together, but I think that's a dumb rule." "Ava, it is a dumb rule, Scarlett said, stepping into the apartment. "Colors don't have to go together to both be good." Ava's face lit up like Scarlett had just solved a major philosophical problem. "See, Dad, she gets it. The apartment was small but lived in a way Scarlett's pristine Tribeca place would never be. There were drawings taped to the refrigerator, a pile of shoes by the door, dinosaur toys scattered across the coffee table. It smelled like garlic and tomato sauce and something that might have been burning. Crap! Caleb rushed back to the kitchen. "Ava, why don't you show Scarlett your dinosaur collection while I make sure we don't have carbonized garlic bread?" "Can I?" Ava grabbed Scarlett's hand without waiting for an answer. "I have 47 dinosaurs." "Well, 46 real ones and one that's technically a pteranodon, which isn't technically a dinosaur, but I count it anyway." For the next 15 minutes, Scarlett received a comprehensive education on dinosaur taxonomy, habitat preferences, and extinction theories from a 7-year-old who clearly had no interest in dumbing down the material for her audience. It was strangely refreshing after a week of adults who assumed she needed everything explained slowly because she was a woman in tech. "Ava, come set the table," Caleb called from the kitchen. "But I haven't shown her the Triceratops yet. After dinner. Go." Ava sighed dramatically but obeyed, and Scarlett found herself alone in the living room for a moment, taking in the space. There were photos on the bookshelf. Caleb and Ava at various ages, and a few that included a woman with Ava's eyes and Caleb's smile. Sarah, presumably. She looked happy in all of them, the kind of happy that came from genuine joy rather than careful posing. "That's my mom," Ava said, appearing at Scarlett's elbow. "She died when I was 3. I don't really remember her much, but Dad talks about her sometimes." She looks nice. Dad says she was really funny, and she made the best pancakes. Ava paused, her small face serious. "Do you make pancakes?" "Not really. I usually just have coffee for breakfast." Ava's eyes went wide. Just coffee? That's not breakfast, that's just a drink. You sound like my assistant. Your assistant is right. You need actual food. She grabbed Scarlett's hand again. Come on. Dad made way too much spaghetti because he always makes too much. Dinner was chaotic in ways Scarlett hadn't experienced since college. Ava talked non-stop about her school day, a boy named Marcus who kept pulling her hair, and her upcoming science project on volcanoes. Caleb interjected occasionally to correct exaggerations or steer the conversation away from topics that were clearly rehashed daily arguments. I'm just saying, if I had a volcano in my room, you're not having a volcano in your room. But for the science project, you can build a model volcano, a small model volcano, that stays in the kitchen where I can supervise it. That's so unfair. Tommy Chen's mom let him build a rocket. Tommy Chen's mom has a bigger apartment and possibly a death wish. Scarlett found herself laughing more than she had in months. There was something unself-conscious about the way Caleb and Ava interacted, a shorthand that came from years of figuring out how to be a family, even after loss had tried to break them. So what do you do? Ava asked Scarlett suddenly. Dad said you're important, but he didn't say what kind of important. Scarlett glanced at Caleb, who shrugged. I run a technology company. What kind of technology? Software mostly. We make programs that help other companies organize their work. Ava considered this. That sounds boring. Ava, it kind of is sometimes, Scarlett admitted. But it's also like solving a really complicated puzzle, figuring out how to make things work better. I like puzzles. Dad got me one with 1,000 pieces for my birthday, but we've only done like half of it because he falls asleep. I work long days, Caleb protested. You always work long days. Yeah, well, somebody has to pay for your dinosaur habit. After dinner, Ava insisted on showing Scarlett the half-finished puzzle, which turned out to be an elaborate illustration of the Mesozoic era. They worked on it together while Caleb cleaned up the kitchen, Ava providing running commentary on which dinosaurs were totally awesome versus which ones were overrated. The T-Rex is overrated, she declared. Everyone thinks it's so cool, but actually velociraptors were way smarter. Fair point, Nate. Dad says I'm not allowed to have strong opinions about dinosaurs at school anymore because I made Sophia cry. What happened with Sophia? She said the Brontosaurus was her favorite, and I told her the Brontosaurus isn't even real. It was a mistake where they put the wrong head on the wrong body, and she got upset. Ava fit a puzzle piece into place with more force than necessary. But it's true. I was just telling her the truth. Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth about things they like. That's what Dad said. But I think that's dumb. If you're wrong about something, don't you want to know? Scarlett thought about all the times people had told her what she wanted to hear instead of what she needed to hear. About how her board members couched concerns in corporate speak rather than being direct. About how Damien had let their relationship decay for months before finally ending it. Yeah, shit, she said. I think you should want to know, but it's also okay to let people like things, even if they're not technically accurate. Ava frowned, clearly wrestling with this concept. So I should have just let Sophia be wrong? Maybe you could have been gentler about it, said something like, actually, the Brontosaurus has an interesting history, instead of, it's not even real. But that's longer. Being kind is usually longer than being right. Oh. Ava was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try that next time. But I'm still not saying T-Rex is the best dinosaur because it's not. Noted. By 8:30, Ava was yawning between sentences despite her protests that she wasn't tired. Caleb emerged from the kitchen and made an executive decision about bedtime that was met with the expected resistance. But Scarlett just got here. Scarlett will still be here after you brush your teeth and put on pajamas. Promise? Ava looked at Scarlett with those serious eyes. Promise. Ava disappeared into her bedroom, and Caleb collapsed onto the couch next to Scarlett with a sigh. Sorry about the interrogation. Don't be. She's amazing. She's exhausting, and I say that with complete love. He ran a hand through his hair. You handled that really well. The thing about being kind versus being right. She's been struggling with that at school. I remember struggling with it too. Probably still do sometimes. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The sounds of Ava getting ready for bed filtering through the apartment. Scarlett looked around the small space, taking in the mismatched furniture and the lived-in warmth of it all. "This is nice," she said. "Nice is generous. It's cramped and the heat doesn't work great in winter and the upstairs neighbors have a bowling ball collection or something based on the noise. It's still nice. It feels like people actually live here." Caleb studied her. "Your place doesn't feel like that. My place feels like a hotel room, expensive and clean and completely impersonal. You could change that. I don't know how." The admission came easier than expected. "I've spent so long focusing on building the company that I forgot to build a life." Before Caleb could respond, Ava appeared in dinosaur pajamas, dragging a worn stuffed triceratops. "Ready for bed?" Caleb asked. "Only if Scarlett says goodnight." Scarlett followed them into Ava's small bedroom, which was exactly what she'd expected. Walls covered in dinosaur posters, a bookshelf overflowing with picture books, a nightlight shaped like a T-Rex. Caleb tucked Ava in while she clutched the triceratops. "Can I ask you something?" Ava said to Scarlett. "Sure. Are you Dad's girlfriend?" "No." The question hung in the air. Scarlett looked at Caleb, who looked just as unsure how to answer. "We're figuring that out," Scarlett said finally. "Is that okay?" Ava considered this seriously. "I guess, as long as you keep coming over. I like you." Something warm bloomed in Scarlett's chest. "I like you too. And you have to come to my soccer game next week. Dad's the only parent who ever comes, and it's embarrassing." "Ava, I'll be there," Scarlett heard herself say. Caleb gave her a look that might have been surprise or gratitude, or both. Ava smiled and snuggled deeper into her blankets. "Good night, Scarlett." "Good night, Ava." They retreated to the living room, pulling the door mostly closed behind them. Caleb went to the kitchen and came back with 2 beers, handing one to Scarlett. "You don't have to come to her soccer game," he said. "She gets attached fast, and I want to come." "Scarlett, I mean it. When is it?" "Next Saturday, 10 in the morning at the park on 5th. He paused. "You know what you're signing up for here, right? This isn't just dinner. If you keep coming around, if Ava starts thinking of you as someone permanent in her life, and then you decide this isn't what you want, I know." "Do you?" "Because I can handle getting hurt. I'm a grown man. I've dealt with loss before. But Ava's 7. She doesn't understand that sometimes adults just drift apart, or get busy, or realize they want different things." Scarlett set down her beer and looked at him directly. "I'm not going to promise I won't screw this up. I probably will, at some point, because I'm terrible at relationships and I work too much, and I don't know the first thing about being around kids. But I'm not going to just disappear. If this doesn't work out, we'll figure out how to handle it in a way that doesn't hurt her." Caleb searched her face for a long moment. "Okay." "Okay? Okay." He took a sip of his beer. "But if you break my daughter's heart, I will personally make sure every pipe in your building develops mysterious problems." "That's fair." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easier than it had any right to. Caleb told her about the challenges of single parenting, the way grief popped up at random moments even years later, the small victories that made the hard days worthwhile. Scarlett found herself sharing things she never talked about: the pressure of being a woman in tech, the constant feeling that one mistake would prove all her critics right, the loneliness that came with success she couldn't share with anyone who'd understand. "You know what's funny?" Caleb said eventually. "Everyone at that party treated me like I was the one who didn't belong. But you looked more out of place than I felt." "What do you mean?" "You were performing. Every gesture, every word, every smile. It was all calculated. Like you were playing a character instead of being a person. That's just what you do in those situations." "No, that's what you've convinced yourself you have to do. There's a difference." Scarlett wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because he was right. "I don't know how to be any other way," she said quietly. "Yeah, you do. You've been doing it all night. With Ava, with me. You've been real." "That's different." "Why?" "Because you're not judging me. You're not waiting for me to fail or looking for weaknesses or trying to figure out how to use me to advance your own agenda. Maybe you're spending time with the wrong people then." It was such a simple observation, but it hit Scarlett like a revelation. When had her entire social circle become people who saw her as a resource or a competitor or a threat? When had she stopped having friends who just liked her for who she was? Her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it. "You can check that if you need to," Caleb said. "I don't need to." But it buzzed again and again. With a sigh, Scarlett pulled it out and saw 17 notifications. Most were work emails that could wait. One was from Damien. "We need to talk about this situation. Call me." She showed Caleb the message. "He's been doing this all week." "You going to call him?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't owe him an explanation for my life. We broke up. He's engaged to someone else. Whatever he wants to say, I don't need to hear it." "Gitch." Fair enough. Caleb finished his beer. "But you know he's not going to stop until he gets whatever closure he thinks he needs. Then he's going to be disappointed." Scarlett's phone rang, Damien's name on the screen. Without thinking, she answered. "What?" "Scarlett. Finally. I've been trying to reach you all week. I've been busy. Clearly. The photos from the party have been circulating. People are talking. Let them talk. Ipu are sorry, tricky. This affects me too, you know. Charlotte's family is very traditional. They're not pleased about the speculation. Speculation about what? That I'm dating someone? You're the one who invited me to your engagement party, Damien. What did you think was going to happen?" Silence on the other end. Then, "I didn't think you'd show up with someone so inappropriate." Heat flooded Scarlett's face. "Inappropriate? You know what I mean? He's a plumber, Scarlett. You're a billionaire. It looks like you're trying to make some kind of point. Maybe I am. Maybe the point is that I don't need to date within our circle to be happy. Maybe the point is that I'm done pretending to care what people like you think about my choices." "People like me? We dated for 2 years, Oz. And then you dumped me because I worked too much." "Well, guess what, Damien? I still work too much. But at least Caleb doesn't expect me to apologize for it." She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking with anger. Caleb was watching her carefully. "You okay?" "No. Yes. I don't know." She stood up and paced to the window. "He called you inappropriate." "I mean, I am technically your plumber. That's not the point. The point is he thinks there's something wrong with you because you work with your hands instead of pushing money around. Like somehow that makes you less valuable as a person." "Scarlett, at the worst part is I used to think like that too. Before I started my company, before I had money, I looked at people like you and thought, I'm never going to be stuck doing manual labor. I'm going to be someone important." She turned to face him. "How horrible is that?" "Pretty horrible," Caleb agreed. "But at least you're admitting it. I don't know how to not be a terrible person. You start by recognizing when you're being terrible, and then you try to do better. That's all any of us can do." He stood up and crossed to where she was standing. "You're not a terrible person. Scarlett, you're just someone who's been so focused on succeeding that you forgot to think about what success actually means." "And what does it mean?" "That's something you have to figure out for yourself. But I don't think it's what you've been chasing." They stood there in his small living room, the city lights visible through the window, and Scarlett felt something shift inside her. Not a dramatic transformation, just a small crack in the armor she'd been wearing for so long, she'd forgotten it wasn't actually part of her. "I should go," she said. "It's late, and you probably have an early morning. Job in Queens at 7. Joy of joys." Scarlett gathered her purse and coat. Caleb walked her to the door, and they stood in the hallway for a moment, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "Thanks for coming tonight," he said. "Ava really liked you." "I really liked her, and dinner, and the puzzle. All of it. So we'll see you at the soccer game?" "Definitely." Caleb smiled, and on impulse, Scarlett leaned in and kissed him. Just a brief press of lips. Nothing dramatic. But when she pulled back, she could see surprise in his eyes. "Sorry," she said. "I should have asked." "Don't apologize." He was still smiling. "Just surprised me." "Good surprised or bad surprised?" "Definitely good." He kissed her again, longer this time, one hand coming up to cup her face. When they finally broke apart, they were both a little breathless. "I really do have to go," Scarlett said. "I know, but I'll see you Saturday." "Looking forward to it." The subway ride back to Manhattan felt different somehow. The same route, the same stations, the same Friday night crowd. But Scarlett felt like she was seeing it all with new eyes. These were people living actual lives, going home to families or friends or empty apartments, carrying groceries and gym bags and the accumulated weight of their days. She thought about Damien's call, about his insistence that Caleb was inappropriate, about how her entire world had been built on the assumption that some people mattered more than others based on arbitrary measures like wealth and status and the right last name. What a stupid way to live. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Vanessa. Saw you trending again. How's the fake boyfriend situation going? Scarlett typed back, It's not fake anymore. The response came immediately. What? Details. Now. Tomorrow. It's late. Fine, but I'm holding you to that. Also, I'm weirdly proud of you right now? Scarlett smiled and put her phone away. When she got back to her apartment, it felt even more sterile than usual. The carefully curated furniture, the spotless surfaces, the complete absence of anything personal or messy or real. She looked at the business card still sitting on her kitchen counter from the first time Caleb had come to fix her sink. Before the party, before the fake date arrangement, before everything had gotten complicated, before she'd started wanting something different. Scarlett picked up the card and tucked it into her wallet, then opened her laptop and started composing an email to her assistant. She wanted to clear her Saturday schedule. All of it. No meetings, no calls, no emergencies that weren't actually emergencies. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she was going to spend a Saturday doing something that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with the strange, terrifying possibility that maybe she could have both success and happiness if she just stopped treating them like opposing forces. The email sent, Scarlett got ready for bed and lay in the dark, thinking about a small apartment in Brooklyn where a 7-year-old slept surrounded by dinosaurs, and a man who'd lost his wife but kept going anyway, building a life that was messy and imperfect and completely real. And for the first time in years, she fell asleep without checking her phone one last time, without running through tomorrow's schedule in her head, without the crushing weight of performance settling over her like a familiar blanket. She just slept. The week that followed felt like living in two different worlds simultaneously. During business hours, Scarlett was still the focused CEO her company expected, approving budgets, managing crises, sitting through endless meetings about quarterly projections. But the moment she left the office, she found herself in a completely different life, one that revolved around text messages about Ava's homework and whether Caleb should bring orange slices or granola bars to the soccer game. On Tuesday, her board meeting ran 2 hours over schedule because Richard Chen wanted to dissect every line item in the Singapore expansion proposal. Scarlett sat through his questions with practiced patience, but her mind kept drifting to the text from Caleb that morning. Ava wants to know if you've ever seen a real volcano. I told her probably not, but she insists I ask anyway. She'd texted back during a bathroom break, never seen one in person. Why? Science project is consuming our lives. Send help. Or a diagram of tectonic plates. When the meeting finally ended, Scarlett found herself pulling up volcano research on her phone instead of reviewing the revised projections. An hour later, she'd ordered 3 books on geology and volcanology to be delivered to Caleb's apartment. Jessica noticed immediately. You're smiling at your phone. I'm not smiling. You absolutely are. It's unsettling. Jessica set down the contract she'd been holding. Okay, I have to ask. Is this thing with the plumber actually real now? His name is Caleb. That's not an answer. Scarlett looked at her assistant, one of the few people she'd actually trust with an honest response. I don't know what it is, but it's something. Good. You've needed something for a while now. Jessica paused. Though for the record, the board members are definitely talking. About? Your recent distraction. Richard's worried you're losing focus. Margaret thinks you're having some kind of quarter-life crisis. And Thomas suggested maybe you need a sabbatical to realign your priorities. Thomas can realign his own priorities. I'm running this company exactly the same as I always have. Except you left yesterday at 6 instead of 9. And you actually took a lunch break on Monday. And you cleared your entire Saturday schedule. Jessica held up her hands before Scarlett could protest. I'm not complaining. I think it's great. I'm just warning you that people are noticing. By Wednesday, people noticing had evolved into a full-blown situation. Margaret Chen cornered Scarlett after a budget review with that expression that meant she was about to say something passive-aggressive disguised as concern. "Scarlett, do you have a moment?" They stepped into an empty conference room, and Margaret closed the door with more force than necessary. "I'm going to be direct," she said. "The board is concerned about recent developments in your personal life." "My personal life is personal, not when it affects your professional judgment. You've been distracted. You're leaving early. And frankly, the optics of you dating someone so far outside our professional sphere—" "Stop!" Scarlett's voice came out colder than she intended. "My relationship status has nothing to do with my ability to run this company. I'm still delivering results. I'm still making good decisions. And who I spend my personal time with is none of the board's business." It becomes our business when it impacts shareholder confidence. We've already had inquiries from investors asking if you're planning to step back. Based on what? The fact that I left work at a reasonable hour twice last week? The fact that I'm dating someone who doesn't come from money? Scarlett took a breath, trying to control her temper. "I built this company from nothing, Margaret. I've given it everything for the past 8 years. And the second I try to have something resembling a personal life, suddenly my commitment is questioned? That's not what I'm saying. That's exactly what you're saying, and it's insulting." Scarlett grabbed her laptop. "I have work to do. Tell the board that my personal life is off the table for discussion. If they have concerns about my professional performance, they can bring them to me directly." She left before Margaret could respond, her hands shaking with anger. Back in her office, she closed the door and stood at the window, trying to calm down. Her phone buzzed. "Caleb, Ava insists you need to know that Stegosaurus had the smallest brain-to-body ratio of any dinosaur. She says this is very important information." Despite everything, Scarlett smiled. She typed back, "Tell her I'm deeply honored to receive this critical knowledge. She says you're welcome, and also can you come over for dinner again on Thursday? We're making tacos." Scarlett looked at her calendar. Thursday evening, she had a networking event with potential investors. The kind of thing she never missed. The kind of thing that had always taken priority over everything else. She texted Jessica, "Cancel Thursday's investor dinner. Personal commitment." The response came back within seconds. "Are you sure? These are the people from the Vancouver deal. I'm sure. Reschedule for next week." To Caleb, she wrote, "I'll be there. Should I bring anything? Just yourself. And maybe lower expectations for the quality of homemade tacos." Thursday's dinner was chaotic in the best way. Ava insisted on helping, which meant tortillas were slightly burned and cheese ended up everywhere except where it was supposed to be. Caleb looked harassed and kept apologizing, while Scarlett couldn't stop laughing at the absurdity of eating slightly charred tacos in a cramped Brooklyn kitchen instead of networking with millionaires over craft cocktails. "This is a disaster," Caleb said, surveying the wreckage of their meal prep. "This is perfect," Scarlett corrected. Ava, oblivious to the adults' conversation, was building a taco tower that defied physics. "I made 17 tacos. That's more than Dad's record." "Pretty sure most of those are going to fall apart when you try to eat them," Caleb said. "Not if I eat them really fast." After dinner, while Caleb attempted to restore order to the kitchen, Ava dragged Scarlett to help with her volcano project. The science fair was 2 weeks away, and Ava had big plans involving baking soda, vinegar, and what she called maximum explosion potential. "We need to make it bigger than everyone else's," Ava explained, gesturing to her sketches. "Tommy Chen's doing a solar system model, but that's boring. Volcanoes are way cooler." "Agreed. What's your plan?" "Build it out of papier-mâché, paint it to look real, and then make it erupt during the presentation." She looked up at Scarlett with those serious eyes. "Dad says I can't use actual lava. Well, probably a wise safety restriction. But the baking soda reaction is pretty good. Want to see?" They spent the next hour working on the volcano while Caleb finished cleaning. Scarlett found herself genuinely invested in getting the proportions right, the paint colors accurate, the eruption mechanism functional. When was the last time she'd worked on something that had no business application, no strategic value, nothing to do with quarterly earnings or market share? "You're good at this," Ava observed, watching Scarlett carefully layer papier-mâché. "At crafts?" "At being here. Some of Dad's friends get weird around me, like they don't know how to talk to kids, but you just talk normal." "You're easy to talk to. You say what you mean. Dad says that gets me in trouble sometimes. Only with people who don't appreciate honesty. Scarlett added another strip of newspaper. I think it's good that you say what you mean. More people should. Ava beamed, and Scarlett felt that warm sensation in her chest again. When had she become someone who cared about making a 7-year-old smile? When had that started mattering more than impressing investors or winning board approval? Caleb appeared in the doorway. Ava, bedtime in 20 minutes. But we're not done. The volcano will still be here tomorrow. Go brush your teeth, Shaq. After Ava reluctantly headed to the bathroom, Caleb sat down next to Scarlett and examined their progress. This is actually pretty impressive. Ava did most of it. I just followed instructions. You're good with her. He paused. I wasn't sure how this would go. Not everyone knows how to be around kids, especially someone else's kid. I like her. She's smart and funny and doesn't pretend to be anything she's not. Scarlett set down the paintbrush. That's refreshing. She likes you too, hasn't stopped talking about you all week. He was quiet for a moment. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. What are we doing here? Because if this is just you trying something different, experimenting with dating outside your usual circle, I need to know now, before Ava gets more attached. The question deserved a real answer, not deflection or uncertainty. Scarlett took a breath. I don't know exactly what we're doing, she said. I've never been good at relationships. I work too much. I'm bad at opening up. And I've spent so long building walls that I don't always know how to let people in. She met his eyes. But I know I look forward to your texts more than my morning briefings. I know I'd rather be here making tacos and building volcanoes than at any networking event. And I know that when I'm with you and Ava, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. Caleb was quiet, processing. That's not nothing. No, it's not nothing. But your board members think I'm a distraction. Your ex-boyfriend thinks I'm inappropriate. And from what you've told me, most of your professional circle thinks you're having some kind of crisis. Let them think whatever they want. Scarlett, I mean it. I've spent my entire adult life caring what people think, shaping every decision around optics and perception and what would look best to investors or the media or whoever I was trying to impress that week. She gestured around the small apartment. And you know what? I've been happier in the past 2 weeks than I've been in years. So if that means my board thinks I'm distracted or my ex thinks I'm making a point, I genuinely don't care anymore. Caleb studied her for a long moment, then leaned in and kissed her. Not the brief, uncertain kiss from last week, but something deeper, more certain. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. Okay then, he said. We're doing this. We're doing this. Fair warning, it's going to get complicated. Dating a single parent always is. And dating someone whose life is as high profile as yours adds a whole other layer. I can handle complicated. Can you handle soccer games at 9 in the morning on Saturdays? Because that's non-negotiable. Scarlett laughed. I'll be there. Saturday morning arrived cold and overcast, the kind of weather that made most people want to stay in bed. Scarlett showed up to the soccer field at 9:15 with coffee and a complete lack of understanding about youth sports protocols. Caleb found her standing near the bleachers looking lost. You came, he said, and she could hear the relief in his voice. I said I would. Yeah, but it's early and cold and you could have been sleeping in your probably very comfortable bed. I wanted to be here. Ava spotted them and came running over, her shin guard slightly crooked and her hair already escaping its ponytail. You came. Did you see? I'm playing midfielder today. Coach says I'm good at stealing the ball. I believe it, Scarlett said. The game was equal parts charming and chaotic. 7-year-olds had approximately the attention span of goldfish, so there were long stretches where half the team forgot they were playing soccer and started picking flowers on the field. But Ava was intensely focused, chasing the ball with determination that reminded Scarlett of herself at that age. She's really good, Scarlett observed during halftime. She gets it from Sarah, Caleb said quietly. My wife played soccer in college. Ava's got her competitive streak. It was the first time he'd brought up Sarah without prompting, and Scarlett wasn't sure how to respond. She settled for, she'd be proud. Yeah, she would. He was quiet for a moment, watching Ava goof around with her teammates. I'm glad you're here. Sarah always said Ava needed more people in her corner, and I've tried, but it's been just the two of us for so long. You're doing an amazing job with her. I'm doing an adequate job. There's a difference. He glanced at Scarlett. But having you around has been good. For both of us. The second half started, and Ava scored a goal that was probably 80% luck and 20% skill, but everyone cheered anyway. After the game, sticky with Gatorade and dirt, Ava insisted they go for pancakes at her favorite diner. It's traditions, she explained. After every game, we get pancakes. That's the rule. So they went for pancakes, and Scarlett found herself crammed into a booth listening to Ava's play-by-play analysis of the entire game. While Caleb interjected corrections about which goals were actually scored by her team versus the other team. It was loud and messy and completely ordinary, and Scarlett couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so content. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again, then started ringing. You can get that if you need to, Caleb said. Scarlett glanced at the screen. Richard Chen. Probably calling about the Vancouver deal or some other crisis that would somehow be framed as urgent when it absolutely wasn't. She declined the call and turned off her phone entirely. Everything okay? Caleb asked. Everything's fine, just work stuff that can wait until Monday. You sure? Positive. By Sunday evening, Scarlett's phone had accumulated 47 missed calls and over 100 emails. She'd spent the weekend alternating between Caleb's apartment and wandering Brooklyn with him and Ava, doing ordinary things like grocery shopping and going to the playground and watching kids' movies that Ava had seen a dozen times but insisted were still funny. When she finally turned her phone back on and saw the deluge of notifications, her first instinct was panic. Something must have gone catastrophically wrong for this many people to be trying to reach her. She called Jessica first. Oh, thank God, her assistant answered. Where have you been? Brooklyn. What's the emergency? There is no emergency, but Richard's been calling nonstop because he wanted your approval on the Vancouver contract revisions, and you weren't responding. And Margaret wanted to schedule an emergency board meeting about Q3 projections, and Thomas needed you to review the None of that is an emergency. I know that, you know that. But apparently spending one weekend unreachable means you've abandoned the company. Scarlett pinched the bridge of her nose. Set up a meeting with the board for Tuesday, all of them, and tell them it's non-negotiable. What are you going to say? Something I should have said years ago. Tuesday's board meeting had the energy of a firing squad, everyone sitting around the table with careful expressions that didn't quite hide their judgment. Scarlett walked in 10 minutes late, which she never did, and didn't apologize for it. Thank you all for making time, she said, sitting down at the head of the table. I know you've had concerns about my recent behavior, so let's address them directly. Richard cleared his throat. Scarlett, we're all supportive of your personal life, but, stop. Let me finish. She looked around the table. I built this company from absolutely nothing. I worked 100-hour weeks. I sacrificed relationships, sleep, my health. I gave this company everything, and in return we became worth billions and made everyone in this room incredibly wealthy. No one's disputing that, Margaret said carefully. Good. Because here's what's changed. I've started leaving work at reasonable hours. I've taken weekends off. I've started dating someone who makes me happy. And apparently, this has raised concerns about my commitment and focus. It's not just about hours worked, Thomas interjected. It's about priorities, about maintaining the drive that got us here. Oh boy. You want to talk about drive? Scarlett's voice went cold. I've been driven for 8 years straight. I've prioritized this company over everything else in my life. And you know what I realized recently? That kind of drive isn't sustainable. It's not healthy. And it doesn't actually make me a better CEO. That's a concerning perspective. Is it? Because in the past 2 weeks, I've made some of our best strategic decisions in months. I've closed 2 major deals. I've restructured our European operations in a way that's going to save us millions. And I did all of that while also having a personal life. The room fell silent. Here's what's actually happening, Scarlett continued. You're not concerned about my performance. You're concerned that I'm not miserable anymore, that I've stopped sacrificing everything for this company. And that makes you uncomfortable because it challenges the narrative we've all bought into, that success requires complete self-destruction. That's not fair, Margaret protested. Isn't it? Show me one person at this table who has a healthy work-life balance, one person who isn't divorced or estranged from their kids or medicating anxiety with expensive scotch. She paused. I refuse to be that person anymore. I can run this company and have a life. And if the board can't accept that, then maybe we need to have a different conversation about my future here. Richard's expression shifted. Scarlett, no one's talking about your future. Good. Then we're clear. I will continue to lead this company with the same strategic vision and competence I always have. But I will not be available 24/7. I will not sacrifice my personal life at the altar of shareholder value. And I will not apologize for being in a relationship that makes me happy. She stood up. If anyone has actual performance concerns, concrete, measurable issues with my leadership, my door is always open, but my personal life is no longer up for discussion. Meeting adjourned. Scarlett walked out before anyone could respond, her heart pounding. She made it to her office, closed the door, and stood there shaking with adrenaline. Jessica appeared 30 seconds later. That was either the bravest or most career-ending thing I've ever witnessed. Probably both. For what it's worth, I think they needed to hear it. Jessica paused. Also, Caleb's downstairs says he was in the neighborhood and brought you lunch. Scarlett's expression softened. Send him up. Caleb appeared 5 minutes later carrying takeout containers and looking slightly uncomfortable in the pristine surroundings of her executive office. Hey, he said. Figured you probably skipped lunch based on the all-caps text from your assistant this morning about the board meeting. How did you know about that? Jessica and I have been texting. She's concerned about you. Everyone's concerned about me lately. Caleb set down the food and pulled her into a hug. Scarlett let herself lean into him, breathing in the familiar smell of his soap and the faint scent of PVC cement that never quite washed out. How'd it go? He asked. I either just secured my position or committed professional suicide. Hard to say which. What'd you tell them? That I'm done apologizing for having a life outside of work. That they need to accept it, or we need to have a different conversation. Caleb pulled back to look at her. Caleb, that must have been terrifying. It was, but also kind of liberating. She managed a smile. Ava would be proud. I said what I meant. She would be very proud. Also, speaking of Ava, she wants to know if you can come to her science fair next Friday. The volcano's ready, and she wants you to see it in action. But I'll be there. You don't have to commit to everything. I want to be there, Caleb, for her and for you. Scarlett took his hand. I meant what I said in that meeting. I'm not giving this up. Whatever this is, it matters more than impressing people who only value me for what I can do for them. He kissed her forehead. Okay, but if they fire you, I'm not rich enough to support your lifestyle. Good thing I'm employable then. They ate lunch in her office, and for the first time since Scarlett had occupied this space, it felt less like a throne room and more like a place where a person worked. Just a person, doing her job, who also happened to have someone who cared enough to bring her food when he knew she'd forget to eat. The rest of the week was tense but manageable. The board members gave her space, though she could feel them watching, waiting to see if this was a phase or a permanent shift. Her performance didn't falter. If anything, she was sharper, more decisive, more creative in her problem-solving. Friday arrived with perfect spring weather, the kind of day that made New York City almost tolerable. Scarlett cleared her afternoon schedule and showed up to Ava's school at 2 o'clock, wearing jeans and a sweater that wouldn't have looked out of place at a casual coffee shop. The science fair was being held in the gymnasium, which had been transformed into a showcase of barely controlled chaos. Kids were everywhere, presenting projects ranging from elaborate to last-minute disasters. Scarlett found Caleb standing next to Ava's volcano, which had been painted in impressive detail to look like an actual stratovolcano. You made it, Ava said, practically vibrating with excitement. Wouldn't miss it. This looks amazing. Wait until you see it erupt. I tested it 17 times to get the ratio right. The presentation started 20 minutes later. Scarlett stood with Caleb, watching Ava confidently explain tectonic plate movement and magma composition to a group of increasingly impressed judges. When it came time for the eruption demonstration, Ava's volcano performed flawlessly, sending a cascade of baking soda foam down the papier-mâché slopes while she narrated the process like a seasoned geologist. The judges moved on and Ava bounded over. "Did you see? It worked perfectly." "It was incredible," Scarlett said honestly. "You should be really proud." "I am proud. This is the best volcano in the whole fair." She paused. "Well, except maybe Jenny's. Hers has lights inside, but mine erupts better." After the fair ended, they went out for ice cream, another apparent tradition in the Mercer household. Scarlett sat in a park watching Ava run around with her ribbon for most creative volcanic display and felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't even realized was unsettled. "You okay?" Caleb asked. "Yeah, just thinking. About how 2 months ago I would have said I was happy. Successful, respected, financially secure. I had everything I thought I wanted." She watched Ava try to climb a tree. "But I wasn't happy. I was just existing, going through the motions. And now? Now I'm terrified most of the time. Terrified I'm going to screw this up with you. Terrified my board's going to push back harder on the boundaries I'm setting. Terrified Ava's going to realize I have no idea what I'm doing." She looked at him. "But I'm also happier than I've been in years. So I guess terror and happiness aren't mutually exclusive." Caleb laughed. "Welcome to parenting. That's basically the whole experience." "Is it always this intense? The fear that you're doing everything wrong?" "Yeah, that never goes away. But you learn to trust yourself. To believe that caring this much means you're probably doing okay." Scarlett's phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "The board has reviewed your performance metrics. No concerns. Continue as you are." She showed Caleb the message. "I think I just won. Or they just realized you were right." Same thing, man. They stayed at the park until the sun started setting, until Ava was exhausted from running around and demanded to be carried home, despite being too old for it. Caleb hoisted her onto his shoulders while Scarlett carried the volcano, and they walked through Brooklyn like a family. The word stopped Scarlett mid-stride. Family. When had she started thinking of them that way? "You coming?" Caleb called back. "Yes, Scarlett said, catching up. "I'm coming." That moment of realization, standing on a Brooklyn sidewalk carrying a papier-mâché volcano while watching Caleb carry his daughter home, should have terrified Scarlett more than it did. Instead, it felt inevitable, like she'd been walking toward this without realizing it from the moment she'd made that desperate phone call asking her plumber to be her fake date. The next few months didn't magically transform into easy. Real life never worked that way, and Scarlett was learning that the hard way. There were nights when she got home from the office at 11 and felt guilty for missing dinner with Caleb and Ava. Mornings when board meetings ran long and she had to cancel plans. Moments when she caught herself falling into old patterns, prioritizing emails over actual human connection. But there were also moments that made all of it worthwhile. Like the Tuesday evening when Ava called her directly. Caleb had put Scarlett's number in his daughter's phone for emergencies because she needed help with a math problem and Dad's terrible at fractions. "I am not terrible at fractions," Caleb protested in the background. "You are, though," Ava said seriously into the phone. "You got 3 wrong yesterday." Scarlett had talked her through the homework while sitting in her office, her CFO waiting outside for a meeting that suddenly felt less important than explaining equivalent fractions to a 7-year-old. Or the Saturday when Caleb's water heater broke and he'd shown up at her apartment at 9 in the morning, apologetic and covered in rust stains, asking if they could use her shower. "I can get a hotel," he'd started. "Don't be ridiculous. Use the shower, both of you." She'd made breakfast while Ava explored the apartment with wide eyes, announcing that Scarlett's place was really big and really empty, which was possibly the most accurate description anyone had ever given. "It is pretty empty," Scarlett had admitted, looking around at her sterile living room. "You should get more stuff, like pictures and books and maybe some plants." Ava had walked over to the massive windows. "The view's cool, though." That afternoon, after Caleb had fixed his water heater and they'd gone home, Scarlett had found herself in a home goods store for the first time in years, buying picture frames and plants she'd probably kill, and a blanket that was soft instead of expensive looking. Small things, human things, things that might make her apartment feel less like a hotel and more like somewhere she actually lived. But the real shift came in August, 4 months after that charity gala, when everything Scarlett had been carefully balancing nearly fell apart. It started with a phone call from her head of operations. Their largest client was threatening to leave over service issues that had apparently been escalating for weeks. Issues that Scarlett should have been monitoring but had missed because she'd been distracted. Or at least, that's what Richard Chen implied during the emergency board meeting he called within hours of the news breaking. "This is exactly what we were concerned about," he said, his tone more disappointed than angry. "Your divided attention is creating gaps in oversight." Scarlett had wanted to argue, but the evidence was right there in the contract termination notice. She'd missed 3 critical status meetings. Her head of operations had sent warnings she'd skimmed but not fully processed. And now they were potentially losing $40 million in annual revenue because she hadn't been paying attention. The meeting ended with a plan to salvage the client relationship, but the damage to Scarlett's credibility felt irreparable. As the board members filed out, Margaret lingered. "I'm not saying you need to choose between your personal life and this company," she said quietly. "But you do need to figure out how to balance both without letting either one fail." Scarlett sat in the empty conference room for 20 minutes after Margaret left, staring at the contract termination notice and feeling the full weight of what she'd built pressing down on her. She'd been so focused on proving she could have both, the successful company and the real relationship, that she'd stopped doing either one well. Her phone buzzed. "Caleb, Ava wants to know if you're still coming to dinner tonight, making your favorite." Scarlett looked at the message, then at the pile of damage control work sitting in front of her. She should cancel. Should spend the evening fixing this mess, calling the client personally, reviewing every account to make sure nothing else was slipping through the cracks. Instead, she texted back, "I'll be there. Might be late, though. No worries, we'll save you a plate." She worked until 7, then caught a cab to Brooklyn. By the time she arrived at Caleb's apartment, she was exhausted and stressed and questioning every decision she'd made in the past 4 months. Caleb took one look at her face and knew something was wrong. "Ava, go brush your teeth." "But it's only 7:30. Now, please." After Ava disappeared into the bathroom, Caleb guided Scarlett to the couch. What happened? She told him everything. The client threatening to leave, the board meeting, Richard's thinly veiled criticism, her own guilt about missing critical details because she'd been prioritizing personal time over work. "I'm failing at everything," she finished. "I can't run the company and do this at the same time." "Do what?" "This. Us. Being here instead of at the office fixing problems." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "So what are you saying?" "I don't know what I'm saying. Scarlett put her head in her hands. "Maybe they were right. Maybe I can't have both. Or maybe you're being too hard on yourself." He moved closer. "One client having issues doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human. Humans miss things sometimes. I'm not supposed to miss things. That's not how this works." Says who? The board members who've spent decades sacrificing their personal lives? The business magazines that glorify 80-hour work weeks? He turned her face toward him. "Scarlett, you built an incredible company. You've made good decisions for years. One mistake doesn't erase all of that. It's not just one mistake. It's proof that I can't balance everything. No, it's proof that you're learning, and learning is messy." He paused. "But if you want to walk away from this, from us, because it's easier than figuring out the balance, I can't stop you." The words hit like cold water. "That's not what I want." "Then what do you want?" Scarlett looked around the small apartment, at the lived-in chaos that had become so familiar over the past months, at Ava's drawings on the refrigerator and the half-finished puzzle still on the coffee table, and the photos of Sarah that Caleb kept because grief didn't have an expiration date. "I want this," she said quietly. "I want to come home to people who care about me for who I am, not what I can do for them. I want to help Ava with her homework and eat dinner at a reasonable hour and not feel guilty about it." "Then you need to stop treating it like a choice between the company and us. You can have both. You just need to set better boundaries. I set boundaries with the board. You set boundaries about your time, but you're still carrying all the weight yourself. When's the last time you actually delegated something important instead of just handling it yourself because you don't trust anyone else to do it right?" The observation stung because it was accurate. Scarlett had spent years building a company around herself as the indispensable center. Of course, she couldn't sustain that while also trying to have a life. "I don't know how to let go of control," she admitted. Yeah, I noticed. He said it gently, without judgment. But you're going to have to learn. Because this, he gestured between them, only works if you stop trying to do everything alone. Ava emerged from the bathroom in her pajamas. Can Scarlett tuck me in? Caleb looked at Scarlett. You up for it?
He's...
She nodded, grateful for the distraction. In Ava's room, surrounded by dinosaurs and drawings, she sat on the edge of the small bed while Ava settled in with her stuffed triceratops. Dad says you had a bad day, Ava said. Yeah, kind of. What happened? I made a mistake at work. A big one. Ava considered this seriously. Did you fix it? I'm trying to. Then it's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. That's what Dad always tells me when I mess up. Your dad's pretty smart. I know, Ava yawned. Are you going to keep coming over, even if you're busy? The question hit Scarlett harder than it should have. Do you want me to keep coming over? Yeah, you're nice. And you're good at math. And you don't treat me like I'm a baby. Scarlett felt her throat tighten. I'm going to keep coming over. I promise. Good. Ava's eyes were already drooping. Night, Scarlett. Good night, Ava. Eat. When Scarlett returned to the living room, Caleb had cleaned up dinner and was waiting with 2 beers. They sat together in silence for a while, the kind of comfortable quiet that only came from actually knowing someone. I'm scared, Scarlett said finally. Of what? Of screwing this up, of letting you down, of becoming someone Ava counts on, and then disappointing her because I'm too focused on work. She paused. Of turning into exactly what Damien said I was, someone who's married to their career and can't actually be present for real relationships. You're here now, aren't you? Because you guilted me into it. I didn't guilt you into anything. You chose to come, even after a terrible day when you had every excuse to stay at the office. He took her hand. That's not someone who's married to their career. That's someone who's learning how to build a life that includes more than just work. It's hard. It's supposed to be hard. Anything worth having usually is. And they sat there for a while longer, and Scarlett felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. The client situation was still a mess. The board was still skeptical. She still had no idea how to actually achieve the balance everyone kept telling her she needed to find. But she wasn't alone in figuring it out anymore. The next few weeks were brutal. Scarlett threw herself into salvaging the client relationship, which meant late nights and difficult conversations, and a level of personal involvement she hadn't needed to deploy in years. But this time, she didn't do it alone. She actually delegated, trusting her team to handle pieces of the recovery while she focused on the strategic relationship repair. It worked. By mid-September, they'd not only saved the client, but had negotiated an expanded contract. Richard Chen had actually sent her a congratulatory email that didn't include any passive-aggressive subtext. The victory should have felt bigger than it did. But Scarlett was learning that professional wins didn't hit the same way when you had other things in your life that mattered just as much. Like the Saturday morning when Caleb asked her to move in with them. They were at the park, watching Ava play on the swings, when he brought it up. I've been thinking, he said carefully. Your lease is up in November, right? Yeah, why? You could move in with us, if you wanted to. Scarlett's first instinct was to list all the reasons why that wouldn't work. His apartment was too small. She needed space for her work setup. They'd only been together for 6 months. It was too fast. But then she looked at Ava, laughing as she pumped her legs higher on the swing, and at Caleb watching his daughter with that expression of fierce love that he never bothered to hide, and she realized all her objections were just fear. Your apartment is tiny, she said. We could find a bigger place. Together. That's a big step. That's it. I know, but I'm ready for it if you are. He paused. And Ava's been asking when you're going to officially live with us. She's tired of you visiting all the time like a fancy tourist. Despite herself, Scarlett laughed. She said that? Her exact words. Scarlett was quiet for a moment, thinking about her pristine Tribeca apartment with its perfect views and its complete lack of personality. About coming home to empty rooms and expensive furniture that no one ever sat on. Okay, she said. Okay. Let's find a place together, something bigger, with room for Ava's dinosaur collection, and your tools, and my home office, and all the mess that comes with actually living instead of just existing. Caleb kissed her right there in the park, not caring who saw. You sure about this? Terrified, but also sure. Irons. They found a place in Brooklyn by October, a 3-bedroom brownstone with character and space and room for all of them to actually live. Moving day was chaos. Scarlett had accumulated way more stuff than she'd realized over the years, and Caleb's collection of tools and supplies seemed to multiply when transferred from one location to another. Ava directed the whole operation like a tiny general, insisting that her room had to be painted purple and green despite Caleb's protests about color coordination. I thought you agreed with me about colors not having to go together, Ava said to Scarlett. I did. I stand by that statement. See, Dad? 2 against 1. The room got painted purple and green, and it actually looked great in a chaotic, joyful way that perfectly matched Ava's personality. Scarlett's mother visited in November, her first time meeting Caleb and Ava. She'd been skeptical on the phone. A plumber? Scarlett? Really? But within an hour of meeting them, she'd pulled Scarlett aside. He's good for you, she'd said simply. I haven't seen you this relaxed in years. He is good for me. They both are. And the little one is precious, smart as a whip. She is. Takes after her mom, according to Caleb. Her mother had squeezed her hand. I'm proud of you, not for the company or the money, for finally building a life that makes you happy. The words had made Scarlett tear up, which she'd blamed on allergies even though they both knew better. By December, their life had settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Scarlett had restructured her role at the company, bringing on a COO, to handle day-to-day operations while she focused on strategy and vision. It meant sharing power in ways that terrified her, but it also meant she could leave work at 6 most days and actually be present for dinner. The board had been surprisingly supportive once they saw her performance metrics actually improve with the new structure. Turned out that a well-rested CEO with proper support made better decisions than an exhausted one trying to control everything herself. On Christmas Eve, Scarlett found herself in their brownstone kitchen, helping Ava make cookies while Caleb attempted to assemble a bicycle that absolutely should have come pre-assembled. This is missing parts, he muttered from the living room. There's no way this is structurally sound. It's fine, Dad, Ava called back. You say that every year. Every year, I'm right. Scarlett smiled, adding chocolate chips to the dough. Her phone buzzed, a text from Vanessa asking if she was free for lunch next week. She typed back a quick yes and set the phone aside, focusing on helping Ava shape cookies that were supposed to be Christmas trees but looked more like abstract triangles. These are perfect, Ava declared, examining their work. Better than Dad's from last year. I heard that, Caleb called. Later that night, after Ava had gone to bed and they'd successfully assembled the bike despite Caleb's predictions of structural failure, Scarlett and Caleb sat on the couch with the Christmas tree lights reflecting off the windows. I got you something, Caleb said, pulling out a small wrapped box. We said no gifts. Yeah, well, I'm bad at following rules. Open it. Inside was a key. Not just any key. It was the original key to his old apartment, the one he'd lived in with Sarah and where he'd raised Ava alone for 4 years. I kept it after we moved, he explained. Couldn't bring myself to turn it in. Felt like giving up the last piece of that life, you know? Scarlett held the key carefully. Why are you giving this to me? Because I'm not giving it up. I'm moving forward. Sarah will always be part of our story, part of Ava's history. But you're part of our future, and I wanted you to have something that represents that I'm choosing this life with you. She kissed him, tasting salt from tears she hadn't realized she was crying. I love you. I love you too. Even though you're a workaholic billionaire with control issues, I'm working on the control issues. I've noticed. Proud of you. They sat there in the quiet of their home, and Scarlett thought about the journey that had brought her here. About the desperate decision to hire a fake date to prove something to her ex-boyfriend. About how that transaction had somehow turned into the most real thing in her life. A year ago, she would have defined success as quarterly earnings and market share and board approval. Now she measured it in Ava's laughter and Caleb's steady presence and coming home to people who knew all her flaws and chose to love her anyway. The company still mattered. Her work still mattered. But it wasn't everything anymore, and that felt like the biggest success of all. On New Year's Eve, they had a quiet celebration at home, just the three of them, pizza and sparkling cider for Ava, champagne for the adults. When midnight approached, Ava insisted they all make wishes. "What are you wishing for?" Scarlett asked her. "Can't tell you, or it won't come true. That's the rule." "Since when?" "Since always." Ava looked at her seriously. "But I can tell you that I'm happy, just so you know." After Ava went to bed, Scarlett and Caleb stood on their small back porch, watching fireworks in the distance and listening to the city celebrate. "No regrets?" Caleb asked. "About what?" Giving up your perfect Tribeca apartment, dating your plumber, moving to Brooklyn, all of it." Scarlett thought about the question seriously, about everything she'd gained and everything she'd let go of to get here. "No regrets," she said finally. "This is better than perfect. This is real." And it was. Not the glossy, Instagram-ready version of happiness that she'd spent years chasing. Not the kind of success that looked good in Forbes profiles or impressed board members or made ex-boyfriends jealous. Just the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of building a life with people who saw her completely. The driven CEO and the woman who sometimes burned pancakes and stayed up too late reading about dinosaurs and cried during kids' movies. The woman who'd spent 30 years proving her worth to people who didn't matter and had finally found the courage to just be herself with people who did. 6 months later, Scarlett did something that shocked the entire business world. She stepped down as CEO, transitioning to executive chair while promoting her COO to the top role. The announcement sent shockwaves through the tech industry, with think pieces debating whether she was abandoning her company or revolutionizing leadership succession. Scarlett didn't care about the think pieces. Instead, she launched a foundation focused on teaching business and technology skills to underprivileged girls. It was work she actually cared about, work that felt meaningful in ways that quarterly earnings reports never had. The foundation's first cohort of students included 15 girls from Brooklyn public schools. Ava attended the opening ceremony, wide-eyed at seeing her home borough celebrated and invested in. "You're helping kids like me?" she'd asked Scarlett afterward. "I'm trying to help girls who have big dreams and not enough support, girls who might become the next generation of leaders if someone just gives them a chance." That's really cool. Ava had paused. "When I grow up, I want to help people too. But with dinosaurs, is there a job for that?" "Paleontology, and yes, that's definitely a job." "Good. Then that's what I'm going to do." It must seem. Damien's wedding had come and gone while all of this was happening. Scarlett hadn't attended, hadn't even thought about it until Vanessa texted her a photo of the society pages the next day. The wedding looked expensive and perfect, and completely joyless, all guilt and grandeur and no warmth. "Dodged a bullet there, Vanessa," Vanessa had written. Scarlett had just sent back a simple, "Yeah, I really did." On a random Tuesday in July, Caleb proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or during some elaborate planned event, just in their kitchen after dinner, while Ava was in the living room building an elaborate dinosaur diorama for school. "Marry me," he said, pulling out a ring that was beautiful but not ostentatious. "Is that a question or a demand?" Scarlett asked, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. "Both, either. Whatever you need it to be." "Yes." "Yeah?" "Yeah, obviously yes." They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony in their backyard. Ava served as ring bearer and gave a speech about how she was glad Scarlett was officially becoming her family. "Because I've been telling kids at school she's my mom for like a year already, so it's about time." The guest list was small. Family, close friends, the people who actually mattered. No board members, no business associates, no one who saw Scarlett as a networking opportunity instead of a person. Vanessa served as maid of honor and cried through the entire ceremony. "You're actually happy," she'd sobbed afterward. "Like genuinely happy. It's beautiful and disgusting." Scarlett's mother had walked her down the aisle, squeezing her hand before letting go. "Your father would have loved this. You, finally letting yourself be loved." The reception was loud and messy, with Ava's friends running wild and Caleb's contractor buddies telling embarrassing stories, and the whole thing feeling more like a really good party than a society wedding. Exactly what Scarlett wanted. That night, after the last guests had left and Ava had finally crashed from a sugar high, Scarlett and Caleb sat in their backyard under string lights, exhausted and happy. "So," Caleb said, "how does it feel to be married to your plumber, Trump?" "Pretty good." "How does it feel to be married to a former billionaire CEO?" "Former. Technically, I sold most of my shares when I stepped down. I'm still rich, but not billionaire rich anymore." "Tragic. However, will we survive?" Scarlett laughed, leaning against him. "You know what's funny? A year and a half ago, I would have told you that giving up control of my company would destroy me, that my identity was so tied up in being CEO that I couldn't exist without it. And now? Now I know that was never who I was. It was just armor, protection against ever having to be vulnerable or need anyone." She paused. "You and Ava taught me that needing people isn't weakness. It's just being human. For the record, we need you too. Ava especially. She's been different since you came into our lives. More confident, more open. She's been good for me too. Both of you have." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear over Brooklyn. Scarlett thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago, standing in her pristine apartment, reading an invitation to her ex-boyfriend's engagement party, and feeling like her perfectly controlled world was crumbling. That woman had been successful by every metric that mattered in her industry. She'd also been profoundly lonely, desperately unhappy, and completely disconnected from anything resembling genuine human connection. The woman she was now had less money, less power, and way less control over her daily existence. She shared her space with a second grader's dinosaur collection, spent her Saturdays at soccer games instead of networking events, and had learned to be okay with the fact that she couldn't fix everything herself. And she'd never been happier, because somewhere along the way, she'd learned something that all her business acumen and strategic planning had never taught her. That success wasn't about building the biggest empire or making the most money or proving herself to people who would never be satisfied. Success was coming home to people who loved you for who you were, not what you could do for them. It was teaching young girls that they could dream bigger than anyone expected. It was watching your daughter, because Ava was her daughter now, in all the ways that mattered, confidently present her volcano project without caring what anyone thought. It was learning that you could be powerful and vulnerable at the same time, that ambition and contentment weren't opposing forces, that the life you actually wanted might look nothing like the life you'd spent years building, and that was okay. A few years later, when Scarlett was asked to speak at a women's leadership conference, she told them the truth. Not the sanitized version about work-life balance or leaning in or having it all. The real messy truth about what it had cost her to finally be happy. "I built $1 billion company before I turned 30, she told the audience, and I was absolutely miserable. I had no real relationships, no life outside of work, no sense of self beyond my job title and my net worth. I thought that was success because that's what everyone told me success looked like." She paused, looking out at the sea of ambitious women staring back at her. "It took hiring my plumber as a fake date to my ex's engagement party to realize I'd been chasing the wrong things. And I know that sounds insane. It was insane. But sometimes the most desperate decisions lead us to the exact places we needed to be all along." She talked about letting go of control, about learning to prioritize people over profits, about the terrifying process of restructuring her entire life around what actually made her happy instead of what looked impressive to others. "I'm not saying everyone needs to step down as CEO or move to Brooklyn or marry their contractor," she finished, "but I am saying that success should be defined by you, not by board members or society magazines or people who don't actually know you. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that the life you built isn't actually the life you want." The speech went viral, of course, because the internet loved a good redemption story. Scarlett got interview requests and book deal offers and invitations to speak at more conferences. She turned down most of them because she'd learned her lesson about overcommitting, about sacrificing her actual life for the appearance of success. Instead, she focused on her foundation, on Ava's rapidly approaching teenage years, on building a marriage that was messy and real and nothing like the perfect relationship she'd once envied from a distance. And on quiet evenings, when Ava was doing homework and Caleb was fixing something that had broken, because things always broke when you actually lived in a place instead of just existing in it. Scarlett would look around their chaotic, imperfect home and feel genuinely grateful, not for what she'd achieved or accumulated or proven, but for what she'd finally allowed herself to have, a life filled with people who saw her completely, loved her anyway, and never once asked her to be anything other than exactly who she was. That, it turned out, was the only success that actually mattered. The kind you couldn't put on a resume or measure in quarterly earnings. The kind that didn't impress strangers at cocktail parties or make good fodder for magazine profiles. The kind that just made you happy when you woke up in the morning, grateful for another ordinary day in an extraordinary life you'd almost missed because you'd been too busy chasing someone else's definition of achievement. Scarlett Vaughn had spent 3 decades learning how to succeed in business. It had taken falling in love with her plumber to finally learn how to succeed at being human, and that made all the difference.